It's late, the room is dark, the day is done. And by every reasonable measure, you should be asleep. But you're not. You're replaying a conversation from 3 days ago. Rehearsing one from tomorrow that may never happen. Running quiet calculations about things you can't control. Outcomes that exist only in the future. Problems that may never arrive. Words you said 6 years ago that no one else remembers. And the strange part, the part that keeps you stuck, is that you know none of this is useful. You know the thinking won't solve anything. You know sleep would help. You know this has happened 100 times before, and it never ends with resolution. It ends with exhaustion. And yet you can't stop. Not because you're anxious. Not because something is wrong. Because something very specific is happening in your brain at night that doesn't happen anywhere near as loudly during the day. And until you understand what that something is, you'll keep calling it a habit, or a personality trait, or just the way your mind works. But it isn't any of those things. It's a neurological event, and it has a cause. Let's sit inside this for a moment. Because the experience deserves more than a name. During the day you function. You move through tasks, conversations, decisions. You manage the noise. You keep pace with the hours. There's always something next. Always a context that pulls your attention forward. Before it has time to settle inward. Work. Responsibilities. Other people's needs. The phone. The list. The obligation that follows the obligation. And in all that movement, the quieter things, the unresolved things, stay in their lanes. Not gone, just contained. But then night comes. The structure falls away. The forward momentum stops. The phone goes face down. The lights go off. And the mind suddenly, without a task to attach itself to, turns inward. And everything that was contained during the day begins to surface. The conversation you didn't finish properly. The decision you keep postponing. The relationship that has a tension in it you haven't found the words for yet. The slow accumulation of things you haven't fully felt, processed, or resolved because the day never gave you space to. And they don't arrive gently. They arrive the way water arrives. When a dam finally gives all at once, without order, without hierarchy. The small and the significant together. The urgent and the ancient side by side. And you try to think your way through them. Because thinking feels like doing something. Because lying still inside the flood feels worse than trying to swim. So you construct scenarios. Imagine conversations. Draft responses to things no one has said yet. Audit your decisions. Rehearse your defenses. And none of it resolves. Because resolution was never what the brain was looking for. What it was looking for was something else entirely. Something that thinking alone cannot provide. And that gap between what you're doing in the dark and what you actually need is where all of this lives. This pattern leaves marks. In the mornings that start heavy before they've begun. In the low-grade fatigue that follows you through days that should feel manageable. In the relationship you have with sleep itself, the way the approach of night can carry its own quiet dread. Because you already know what's waiting there. In the identity it builds slowly. I'm an overthinker. I can't switch off. This is just who I am. But it isn't who you are. It's what your brain does when it runs out of structure and hasn't been given another way. The mind that won't go quiet at night is not a disordered mind. It is, in most cases, a very active mind that has been given no legitimate channel during the day. Think about what nocturnal rumination almost always involves. Relationships, identity, meaning, unfinished emotional business, not logistics, not facts, the deep material, the things that require not just thought, but time, attention, and genuine processing. And during a full, structured, performance-oriented day, that material rarely gets what it needs, so it waits, patiently, mostly, until the moment when all the scaffolding falls away and there is finally nothing else demanding to be done. And then it arrives, not as disorder, as signal. The night thinking isn't a malfunction. It is the only window your deeper processing has been able to find. You haven't been failing to manage your mind at night. You've been running a mind that has more to process than the day ever gave it room for, and that has learned, by necessity, to wait until dark. To understand what's actually happening, you need to know about two interlocking systems that operate very differently in waking and resting states. The first is the default mode network, the DMN. This is a set of interconnected brain regions, including the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, and the hippocampus, that activate when the brain is not focused on an external task, when you're at rest, when you're daydreaming, when you're not being demanded of. The default mode network is the brain's internal processing system. It handles self-referential thought, thinking about who you are, what matters to you, how you relate to others. It processes emotional memory. It integrates experience, looks for meaning, runs simulations of future events. During the day, when your attention is directed outward, toward tasks, screens, conversations, the DMN is suppressed. It doesn't go offline. It just goes quiet. But the moment external demands drop, the moment you lie down, close your eyes, remove the override, the DMN activates. And it begins doing exactly what it was designed to do, processing everything that the directed, task-focused day left unfinished. This is not a glitch. This is the brain doing essential maintenance work. The problem is that in modern life, we have structured almost every waking hour around external demand, leaving the DMN with only one window in which to operate, the moment we're trying to sleep. The second mechanism is what researchers call cognitive load carryover, the residual activation of unresolved mental tasks that persists in working memory even after the tasks themselves are no longer active. Psychologist Bluma Zygarnik documented this in the 1920s. The now well-established finding that the brain holds unfinished tasks in a kind of mental suspension, maintaining background activation until they reach some form of closure. The mind keeps the loop open. And open loops, accumulated across a full day of things started, interrupted, unresolved, and postponed, flood into consciousness the moment external structure disappears. Here is the metaphor. Imagine your mind as a large office building. During the day, every floor is occupied. Every room has people in it working. The noise of the building, the activity, the demand, drowns out everything else. But at night, the building empties. And in the sudden quiet, all the sounds that were always there, the hum of the ventilation system, the creak of the structure, the unread messages still sitting on unmanned desks, become audible for the first time. The building wasn't broken during the day. It was just too loud to hear itself. Night is when the building hears itself. And if the building has been running on override for months, if the desks have been piling up, the messages going unread, the internal systems quietly flagging things that never got addressed, the silence of night doesn't bring peace. It brings a reckoning. The simple mental model. The DMN is a processing queue. During the day, it gets paused. At night, it runs. The size of the queue determines the intensity of the night. And most people never reduce the queue during the day, which means by the time they lie down, it has accumulated everything the waking hours refused to hold. Here are 5 principles for working with nocturnal overthinking, each targeting a different layer of the mechanism. The most direct intervention is the simplest to understand and the hardest to actually do. The default mode network is going to run. The only question is when you let it. If you never give it a deliberate window during the day, never allow the brain time to process internally without task, without output, it will take the window it can find, which is always the same window. What to do? Schedule 15 to 20 minutes of unstructured, undirected mental time during the day. No phone, no task, no podcast filling the silence. A walk without destination. Sitting without agenda. Staring out a window without it being called wasted time. Why it works. Research on mind wandering by psychologist Jonathan Schooler found that allowing the DMN to operate freely during designated rest periods reduces its compulsive activation at other times, specifically at night. You are not being unproductive. You are running scheduled maintenance before the system forces an emergency repair. Real-life example. You take a 15-minute walk after lunch with no audio, no agenda. The mind wanders. You let it. Some of what surfaces is trivial, some of it is actually important. You let all of it move through without managing it. That night, the queue is smaller. Not empty, smaller. And smaller is enough to make a difference. The Zeigarnik effect means the brain holds unfinished tasks in working memory. The antidote is structured closure, giving the brain a signal that the task has been acknowledged, even if not yet completed. What to do? Spend 5 minutes before bed writing down every open loop, every unresolved task, concern, or unanswered question currently sitting in your mind. Not solving them, just listing them. 1 line each, then close the notebook. Why it works. Research by psychologist Michael Scullin at Baylor University found that writing a specific to-do list before bed, even briefly, significantly reduced the time it took participants to fall asleep and reduced nocturnal cognitive activation. The brain doesn't need the problem solved. It needs confirmation that the problem has been registered. The act of writing it down tells the working memory. This has been seen, you can release it. Real-life example. Before you get into bed, you spend 5 minutes writing. Email to respond to, conversation with partner unresolved. Appointment to reschedule. Decision about the project still pending. You write them down, close the notebook, not fixed. Not resolved, just filed. The mind, trusting that nothing has been forgotten, has less reason to keep the lights on. Once nocturnal rumination begins, once the thought loop has activated and the mind is running, trying to think your way out of it accelerates it. The loop feeds on engagement. The counterintuitive intervention is to leave the level of thought entirely and move into the level of sensation. What to do? When the loop activates, redirect attention to specific, concrete physical sensory inputs. The weight of the blanket on your body. The temperature of the air at the edges of the room. The sound of something ambient, rain, a fan, your own breath. 5 specific sensory details, named silently, one at a time. Why it works. This is a grounded application of sensory attention training, supported by extensive research in mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. Sensory attention activates the brain's present-moment processing systems and reduces activation in the DMN, specifically in the self-referential regions that drive ruminative loops. You are not suppressing the thoughts. You are redirecting the brain's limited attentional bandwidth away from the past and future and into the present moment, which, by definition, contains nothing that needs solving tonight. Real-life example. The loop starts. You notice it, the same thought for the 4th time. Instead of engaging, you shift, the sheet against your forearm. The distant sound of something outside, the slight warmth near your shoulder. The darkness of the ceiling above, your own slow exhale, one by one. The loop doesn't disappear, but it loses traction. And traction is what keeps it alive. Much of what surfaces at night isn't a problem to be solved. It's an emotion to be felt. The mind runs analysis loops at night because analysis feels like action, and action feels safer than simply sitting with something unresolved. But emotional material doesn't respond to analysis. It responds to acknowledgement. What to do? When you identify what's actually underneath the loop, the anxiety, the grief, the unresolved tension, practice naming it without moving immediately to problem solving. I'm worried about this. I'm sad about that. I'm angry and I haven't let myself feel it yet. That's it. No next step. Just the naming. Why it works. Affect labeling research by neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman consistently shows that naming an emotional state in specific language reduces activation in the amygdala, the brain's threat center, and restores prefrontal regulation. You are not indulging the feeling. You are completing a neurological step that the analytical loop was trying to skip. Real-life example. You've been running the same conversation in your head for 40 minutes. You stop and ask, what am I actually feeling about this? The answer comes, I'm hurt, and I haven't told anyone that. You name it, just that. The conversation in your head runs a few more times, then gradually, finally goes quiet. The brain doesn't shift states instantaneously. Moving from the high-demand cognitive state of a full day directly into sleep is like asking a car to go from highway speed to a full stop without a deceleration lane. The system needs a transition. And without a deliberate one, the mind creates its own, which is always the rumination loop. What to do? Build a 20 to 30-minute wind-down ritual that is specifically designed to signal a state change to the nervous system, not screens. Not emotionally stimulating content. Not conversations that open new cognitive demands. Something that is quiet, sensory, and personally regulating. A book with no stakes. Slow stretching, dim light, warm water. The specific activity matters less than its consistency, because the brain learns state transitions through pattern. Why it works. Sleep researcher Matthew Walker's work on pre-sleep cognitive arousal shows that the brain's transition into sleep is not a passive process, but an active one, requiring a measurable reduction in core body temperature, cortisol, and cognitive activation before sleep architecture can properly begin. A consistent wind-down ritual trains the brain to begin that transition on cue, using the ritual itself as the signal that the day's demand structure is over. Real-life example. For 2 weeks, you do the same 3 things in the same order before bed. Dim the lights. Read something you find gently engaging, but not consuming. Spend 5 minutes with the open loop list. By the end of the 2 weeks, the first step, dimming the lights, has become its own signal. The brain begins to decelerate before you've asked it to. Here's the model. Your mind is a processing queue. During the day, the queue pauses, buried under structure and demand. At night, the override lifts and the queue runs. The size of the queue at midnight is determined almost entirely by how much you allow the queue to move during the day. Give the default mode network a window. Close the open loops in writing before bed. Interrupt the loop with sensation, not more thought. Process the emotion, not just the situation. Build a transition that teaches the brain night has arrived. Not as a sleep routine. As a daily practice of giving the mind the internal time it needs to stay clear, so that darkness stops being the only moment it's finally allowed to speak. The mind that won't go quiet at night is not your enemy. It is the part of you that has been patient all day, waiting for the noise to stop, waiting for the tasks to end, waiting for a single moment when it might finally be heard. And the way you've been responding to it, the frustration, the suppression, The hours of trying to think your way into stillness, that isn't failure. That's what anyone does when they don't yet know what the signal is asking for. Now, it isn't asking you to solve anything. It isn't a sign that something is wrong. It's the sound of a mind that has more depth than the day was able to hold, asking, in the only window it's been given, for a little room. Give it that room earlier. And the night, for the first time in a long time, might simply be for sleeping.